this guy, his name's Shakespeare, and Shakespeare just won the lottery. $30 million freaking dollars. So one day, Shakespeare's at work and he's helping his coworker, this guy, this truck driver, who we'll just call Trucker. So Shakespeare and Trucker, they're out on the road and they stop at the mini mart to buy something. And Shakespeare asks Trucker to go inside and pick him up a couple of lottery tickets. And then Shakespeare gives him money for them. So Trucker goes in the store, he buys the tickets, he gives them to Shakespeare, and one of those tickets wins Shakespeare the $30 million jackpot. And he is pumped. I mean, this is gonna change his life. So he gets the money, and instead of taking multiple payments, he takes the lump sum, and it ends up being about $17 million. And with that $17 million, he's able to move out of his mom's place. He buys himself some nice cars. He buys himself a house with a pool. He puts $1 million into a trust fund for his son. Things are really looking up for Shakespeare. Until, soon enough, predictably, people around him start hitting him up for money. Like, hey, can you loan me 10 grand or so? And Shakespeare, he's a generous dude, so he says yes. And he ends up loaning out lots of money to his friends and family. And pretty quickly, people around him start getting greedy. And they start hitting him up for money all the time. Even Trucker, who picked up the lottery tickets for Shakespeare, he wants some of that money. And he files a lawsuit saying the winning lottery ticket was actually his. So a whole court case kicks off and Shakespeare's got to go to court and the jury ends up siding with Shakespeare. But it's a really long and expensive process and Shakespeare is just done with all these greedy ass people. But then, one day, he meets this woman Dee Dee. And Dee Dee, she's a businesswoman and she eventually offers to help Shakespeare manage his finances and be his advisor. And most importantly, to get him away from a bunch of these greedy ass people. And by this point in the story, Shakespeare had either spent or loaned out the vast majority of his winnings. So he agrees to let Dee Dee come on and help him manage his money. And Dee Dee, she gets to work right away. She's helping him set up his bank accounts properly. She's chasing down people that owe Shakespeare money, trying to get them to pay him back. And so far, she's doing a pretty good job. But over time, Dee Dee also starts getting greedy. And slowly, she starts transferring Shakespeare's finances into her own account. And she starts buying stuff for herself with his money, and she changes the title on his BMW to her name, and the deed to his house to her name. She essentially takes over almost everything he owns. And Shakespeare doesn't realize it because A, she's the one managing and advising him, and B, he's illiterate. He can't read or write well, like at all. So he's extra vulnerable to being ripped off. And to make it worse, once Dee Dee takes over everything he owns, she decides it's time to get rid of Shakespeare for good. And she comes up with a plan. Now, this is one of those cases where we don't know a lot of the details of what happened, but here's what we know. One day, Dee Dee takes a pew-pew and she goes over to Shakespeare and she sadly shoots him twice in the chest and she unalives him. Then she goes and gets her ex-husband, who he thinks he's just helping her out with some construction work. She gets him to use a backhoe and dig a giant hole in the backyard on her property. Property that she, of course, purchased using Shakespeare's money she stole. But anyway, then she gets her ex-husband to fill up that hole, and she gets some other guys to put a slab of concrete over it. Then Dee Dee moves into Shakespeare's house and takes over the remainder of his assets. While she's doing that, she gets Shakespeare's phone, and she just starts casually texting with his friends and family, just to make it look like Shakespeare is still alive. But luckily, that actually backfires, and it causes people to get suspicious. Because remember, Shakespeare's illiterate, so people are like, who's sending me these texts? And where the hell is Shakespeare? We haven't seen him in months. And so 7 months go by, and no one has seen Shakespeare. So his cousin actually reports it to the police. And of course, the police immediately look into Dee Dee, but Dee Dee says, Shakespeare's fine, he just wanted to get away from everyone. Look, he's still texting me. But secretly, Dee Dee's like, oh shit, they're on to me. So she goes and finds one of Shakespeare's acquaintances, this guy Greg. And Dee Dee offers to pay Greg $300 if he'll call Shakespeare's mother and pretend to be Shakespeare and be like, hey mom, I'm alive, I'm fine. So that the mother will then tell police that Shakespeare's not actually missing and police will stop investigating. And Greg agrees to do this. He's like, $300? Cool. So he makes the phone call to Shakespeare's mom pretending to be Shakespeare. But Shakespeare's mom isn't buying it. So she reports this phone call to the police. And police look into it and they trace the call back to Greg. So they bring Greg in and they question him, and Greg admits Dee Dee paid him to make that call. And then police tell him like, hey, Shakespeare is seriously missing. He might be out there hurt somewhere. And they tell Greg he needs to help them and work as an informant so that they can bust Dee Dee and ultimately figure out what actually happened to Shakespeare. And Greg agrees. So then they concoct this whole undercover sting operation. And so Greg wears a wire. Well, he doesn't actually wear it. He hides it inside a Red Bull can. But regardless, Greg has a wire. And he meets up with Dee Dee. And Dee Dee straight up tells tells him she's the reason Shakespeare is missing, and that she's looking to hire someone to take the fall for Shakespeare's disappearance. And Greg is like, hey, I know just the guy. So the next time Greg and Dee Dee meet, Greg brings his cousin, who is about to go to prison for something anyway. So Greg's cousin tells Dee Dee, yeah, he'll absolutely lie to the cops and tell them he's the one who unalived Shakespeare, if she'll pay him $50,000. I mean, this is literally a plot on Breaking Bad. And so Dee Dee agrees to this, which is great, because Greg's cousin actually turns out to be an undercover cop. So they arrest Dee Dee, here's her mugshot, she goes to trial, she's found guilty of murdering Shakespeare in the first degree, and she's sentenced to life. And all this happened in Florida. Shout out to Florida.